Welcome to the Leadership is Female podcast. Stephanie Connolly, Senior Vice President of Integrated Marketing at Front Office Sports. We are so excited to have you here today. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Emily. I'm Stephanie Connolly. As you mentioned, I'm the Senior Vice President of Integrated Marketing at Front Office Sports. Front Office Sports is a multi-platform sports media company, and we cover the influence of sports on business and culture. And we do that through a daily newsletter. We have a digital site, multiple podcasts across social channels, and thought leadership events.
Yeah, and you've built your career in New York in marketing. How did you get your start and how did that first experience shape your career?
Sure. So it's funny, my very first job out of college when I graduated at the University of Delaware was in facilities management, which has nothing to do with marketing. And I worked at the now defunct communications company, MCI. And I was in charge of working with the team that built out office space. So if we were opening an office in San Francisco, I would work on space planning, budgeting, ordering equipment, all that kind of stuff. So really project management skills. And one day a friend of the family called up and said, "Hey, I am the president of the US for this dinnerware company. We're looking for someone to do marketing in the US. Do you know anyone? And I said, "Oh, I might be interested." So I ended up going to work for Denby, which is really cool, casual dinnerware. And one of my responsibilities was determining where we advertised in magazines, in print. Print was huge, and the bridal space was big. If a bride registered for your product, you were guaranteed lots of sales. So I got to know the publishing side, Brides Magazine and Bridal Guide and Gourmet. So that was kind of my first introduction to media. And about a year in, I was traveling around the country speaking at bridal events. I was single, which is kind of funny, telling brides how to register for their everyday dinnerware. And Bridal Guide magazine called and said, "Hey, would you be interested in kind of coming over to our side and be the promotion manager there?" So I did that for about a year and it was great. Easy transition. The bridal market was something that I knew. And then all of a sudden one day my phone rang and it was Glamour magazine, and a recruiter called and said, "We're looking for a job. We're looking for someone in marketing. Are you interested?" I was like, "Well, hell yeah, I'm 26 years old," and Glamour, which again is now a defunct brand. So I interviewed and got the job there. So I spent a lot of years at Condé Nast. I worked at Glamour, worked on big events like Women of the Year, proposals, always on kind of the marketing side, doing RFP responses, ideas, anything to help drive revenue for the magazine. And at the time it was just magazines, but then it grew into digital and social. So I did about 10 years there. I was at Glamour. I went to GQ for a hot minute and then was at Golf Digest for 4 years. And that was really fun. That was like, I'm a huge sports fan. So for me, that was just connecting all of my passions with media and marketing and sports. I was promotion director there and then creative services director. So I worked on Golf Digest, which was a monthly, Golf World, which was a weekly, and Golf World Business, which was a trade. I did all of their sales materials. I did events, promotions. It was great. It was right when Tiger Woods' career was taking off, and it was just a super fun time to be there. My boss who hired me at Golf Digest left and went to Meredith, which is another big publishing company, and she recommended me for a job over there. So I went over and I was the marketing director of Child Magazine. I kind of joke that my life was always one step behind my life stage. So I was single and I was talking to brides, and then I was at Child Magazine and I didn't have kids. So I was there for a while and then expanded that role to Child, Parents, and American Baby, really kind of selling that whole mom network and that mom audience. And then I moved into a corporate role. So Meredith had, I don't know, at the time, it was probably over close to 30 brands, everything from Better Homes and Gardens to More Magazine, Country Living, Health Magazine, all different brands. And so I worked in corporate. I worked with the sales team. I headed up the corporate marketing department. And again, coming up with ideas for big clients, Unilever, Procter and Gamble, the Walmarts of the world, multimedia, multi-million dollar deals, which was super fun. Also led the activation team there. So once a program sold, we activated and made sure it went smoothly. And then I had branding. So the company website, go to market materials, as well as events. So I'm a Midwest girl. It was great working for a Midwest first company at Meredith. I was there for, 10 years. Left, swore I wasn't going back to media, was networking in sports. I really wanted to get back in sports. I think for me, it was important to kind of marry that passion of sports that I have with marketing. Wasn't as easy as I thought it was to break into the sports world. So I kind of went on my own and did consulting. And I did that for 2 years, did some project work, and landed at Industry Dive, which is a B2B media company, and did a lot in their branded content studio. That's a very long-winded answer, but then that's how I got to front office sports. I honestly saw a listing on LinkedIn and applied, and the COO called me. We had a great conversation, and here I am today.
Wow. Well, we got to go back just for a minute because I always have two books that I'm reading at any given time, one on business and one chick lit, which is basically what you lived, because I feel like every book was or is a girl living in New York City working for one of the Condé Nast publications. So just give me a little bit more insight on what that was really like. What was it like working at, let's pick Glamour, because as soon as you said Glamour magazine, I could just picture the cover and the font and the pictures and the copy. So a little bit more insight on that Glamour job.
Yeah. It was awesome. I mean, listen, it'd be like landing your dream job, and I have to say I fell into it, and I would have, the brand was amazing. I was at Women of the Year with the Women's World Cup soccer team, and Jewel was there, like all just these cool celebrities. I kind of almost felt like I wasn't as cool as I should have been working there. I loved it. I lived in Hoboken, right across the river from New York City. I commuted in every day. It was an incredible building, great energy. I mean, you would be in the elevator and run into Anna Wintour, Cy Newhouse. There are always kind of celebrities in and around. But I have to say, it was one of the places. I remember one time I was in the elevator with Mary Berner, who was the publisher of Glamour and is still very big in the media space. And she said, "You'll never work harder in your life than at this company, but you are surrounded by super creative and energetic people." And she was so spot on. And I think too, working there, like each magazine kind of had its own culture. And Glamour, I still have so many of my good friends today, our mentors and fellow coworkers that I worked with there. So it was fun. I mean, it was definitely cool.
And what did you learn about connecting with an audience through the audience of 100 million women when you were working for these various magazines?
Yeah. I mean, the thing, Meredith was huge. And I think if you work at a brand where you literally are connecting with consumers around their passions, it's just, it's a home run. And not to use a sports analogy, but at Meredith, it was all about food, family, home, and personal well-being. And so I, always say that I was fortunate to work at brands and media brands that really talked to the passion points of consumers. And for me, that was important because I had those same passion points as well. So yeah, it was fun. It was great. I mean, you were limitless in your ideas, come up with something really cool around food, around family, home. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, you laid some really good advice there. It was very quick, so I have to restate: connect with people around their passions, and it's a home run. Talk to the passion points of the consumers. It's just such a good reminder about that foundation of marketing and sort of a gut check on, is the messaging that you're putting out
Mhm.
connecting in the way that it should be around those passion points. So great advice. And
Yeah.
let's dive into front office sports. You've been with FOS for nearly 2 years. If our audience has not yet heard about FOS, tell us more about that company, what you do, that massive content engine. You mentioned the newsletters, the podcasts. Before we hit record, we talked about Rising 25. Let's hear more about front office sports and then specifically how you help that content engine continue to chug forward.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm coming up on 2 years. It's been quite a ride, and just the growth that we've seen. For those of you that don't know, Front Office Sports was actually started by our CEO when he was in college at the University of Miami, and he had a real interest, Adam White, real interest in the business side of sports, not just who won the game, but what athletes are investing in what companies, and which media deals are being done, and what kind of endorsement deals are happening. So it really is kind of a niche and a white space in the market. And while we cover the business of sports, if you think about it, if you're we say that we market to the modern sports consumer. Of course, I want to know who won the game last night and all of that. But if you're really passionate about sports, it goes back to that passion. You kind of want to consume everything and anything there is to know. And you want to know why pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the world. And Mav Carter just bought a team with LeBron and all of that. You follow. I think sports has become such a part of culture these days, and it crosses over into music, into real estate, into tech, all these different spaces. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's, what front office sports is about. When I came on, they were building out their leadership team and building out their marketing team. I'm very proud to say I was the first female that came on board on the leadership team, and really helped build and shape the marketing team from the ground up. So for the first 6 months, we were really focused on activation. Somebody bought a program and we needed to make sure everything went off without a hitch. And then we morphed into really coming up with good ideas, branded content series, launching brand extensions. We launched a whole course series called FOS Learning. It's a series of free online courses anyone can take to help better your professional development. We did one with Pepsi on sports marketing, NIL, when college athletes were allowed to profit off their name, image, and likeness. We did that with Facebook and Instagram. We have a crypto in sports. So really looking at all the different, we call it education at the speed of culture, because crypto is happening and you can't even get your arms around all the different things there are to know about crypto, let alone how it is in sports. So we launched a lot of extensions. We launched podcasts, FOS Learning. Rising 25 is one of our biggest franchises. We just had our celebration last week in New York City. We honor 25 young professionals in the business of sports for their accomplishments. We get over 500 entries. Yes, I did read all of them along with many people on the team. And then we have a panel of external judges that help us get, to the final list of 25. We had a big leadership summit at Anheuser-Busch's office last week in New York City, which was great. We had workshops and panel discussions and just really the opportunity for the winners to learn and network with other winners as well as leaders in the industry. And then we had a big party at a nightclub in New York City on Thursday night, which was totally fun, despite the fact that it poured rain sideways. But one thing you can't control.
No, definitely not. Well, you're certainly doing a lot, and your role is to lead the integrated marketing team, including branding, pre-sale ideation, partner activation, branded content, tentpole franchises and events, and creative services. So, as you stated, first woman on the leadership team, major congratulations on that. But what that means is you run a lot of things, and you are in charge of a lot, and you wear a lot of hats. So what has been the biggest win you've experienced in this role? And conversely, what has been the biggest challenge?
Gosh, I feel like there's so many wins, but I would have to say building out my team. I mean, I'm so proud of, I had 2 people when I started, and now we're a bigger group of 7. We've got a big external network. So really just seeing them shine. Um, I also love, I say I love a big hairball where it's like, hey, we need to do we need to do a 5K race. And I'm like, okay, how are we going to do that? And just going out and trying to figure out how to do it as well. Um, I worked on a lot of great branded content projects. We did one, which was our first big one with Fidelity, called Second Acts, where we interviewed former athletes who are retired on what they're doing after the game. So that was exciting because I actually saw something that I helped work on the idea, get sold through, and then really bring it to life. So to see kind of that whole full circle was a big win. What was it? Obstacles or
Yeah,
challenges?
yeah, the biggest challenge that you've had.
Not enough people and not enough time to do all the fun things we want to do.
Startup world, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think we were talking before, but the one thing, I've always worked at these big companies, and you come up with a great idea. It's like, oh, okay, let's run it up the flagpole and through all the red tape. So one of the many things that's great about working at a startup is you can say, hey, we want to do an event at Super Bowl. And it's like, go, great, do it. On the flip side of that, there's so many things we want to do, and there's so many great ideas out there, and the brand is super popular and getting a lot of traction. So I think the challenge is just kind of prioritizing and where to focus. That would probably be, one of the big challenges, but it's a good problem to have, I think.
Absolutely. What are the trends you're seeing with your partners right now in integrated marketing?
So a couple things. I mean, branded content is huge. Clients want to be part of custom content, but it has to be authentic where they're integrated. So if you look at the Second Act series, it's not how do you retire and where do you spend your money? It's literally celebrating the journey of retirement and how, athletes decided to invest and go through things. Sponsored by Fidelity. So I do think the pendulum has shifted. Branded content is huge in that kind of authentic space. Social has become, we have a huge social following, over 500,000 across all of our channels. We're the #1 sports publisher on LinkedIn. So a lot of people want to know, how do we leverage our audience? How do we get our brand out there? And then that kind of comes back to us, is how do we police it and keep it to an authentic way to our brand so that we don't lose our followers? Consumers are definitely savvy with all social media and Instagram and influencers, and they see right through anything that's just a straight up ad. I
Yeah,
also think events are coming back. People are excited to be back in person. It was so fun last week to actually have a couple hundred people in a nightclub and dancing, and after 2 years of everything virtual. So I do think events are definitely making a big comeback as well.
yeah. This hybrid between work from home and gather for events is sort of where we're at in this period of time right now. And you guys are really nailing it with a remote workforce and gathering for executive summit and the big events that you're doing. I want to ask you, you've given such a great journey explanation of where you've come in your career. What's been a big hurdle that you've had to overcome along the way?
I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, I was hell bent on trying to break into sports, and it was tough. It was really tough. I think I remember I interviewed with a team in the New York area, and I was talking to their chief revenue officer, and I said, what could be holding me back from this position? I think in my mind, because I came from media and didn't come from sports, thought it might be a harder transition. And I'll never forget, he said to me, I don't want someone from sports. I want someone that can think differently and outside of the box. And so for me, that was really a big, I think, confidence booster a little bit, that like you can pivot and you can go into something different. So I mean, it was definitely, yeah, I think getting into sports was a little tough. And I think, I had the big job at Meredith. I was in a round of reduction in workforce. And I think that was a hurdle, going out on my own and doing consulting and then trying to figure out like, how do I get back? What's my next step? Do I want to stay with a big company, go try the startup thing? So that was a little bit of a hurdle there too.
Yeah, I can totally see those different iterations in your career and how that presented those different hurdles at different checkpoints. But you said something there that I want to remind the audience is that you had a boss say, I don't want someone from sports. I want someone who can think differently. And I think that's a great reminder for our listeners who are hiring managers and also those who are trying to break into the market. It's a different market at this point in time. And so I think we can only expand our workforce if we start to think ourselves a little bit differently about who it is we want to hire and making sure that that audience or that the people we hire reflect our audience as well. And I think that's something that we can all sort of reflect on and think about a little bit in this period of time where businesses are ramping back up again. We can think about, how can it be a little bit different in the
Mhm.
future? And, look at the opportunities that unfolded for you and the contributions you're able to make at such a massive scale with front office sports. And
Yeah,
so,
for sure. I mean, I always say to people, you take a skill with you from every job you've had, whether it's waiting tables, whether it was building out office spaces and buying copiers. Now I'm a project manager. Now I can go and design a showroom space. I mean, there's always skills. And I do think, like, to your point, it's hard, right? We're in a digital age. If I have an open position, I get 600 resumes. How do you sift through them?
yeah.
How do you stand out? And I do think, sometimes having those skills, I was a great project manager and that translated over. I was a creative thinker, really thinking about what are the skills you bring to the job versus having to just be from that industry as well.
Totally agree. And you touched on this before, but what is your superpower? So I came up with this question after reading the recommendations and endorsements from your raving fans on LinkedIn that include, and I'm going to, maybe embarrass you, maybe help pump up your ego if you need it this morning. But Stephanie has a unique combination of being creative and strategic and is able to translate ideas seamlessly into the digital, mobile, and social spaces. We've been on many client meetings together, and she's a dynamic presenter, on her toes ideator, and best of all, clients love her. And finally, she listens to clients and creates multi-platform marketing ideas that grow their business. An excellent presenter. So, okay, those are glowing reviews that are
That's
completely
nice.
public on your LinkedIn, and I love to do that because I want to remind you what a superstar you are, and then also ask you if you were to identify what your superpower was, what would you say, and how do you employ that each and every day?
Wow. Well, thanks for that reminder because everybody always needs that. So I appreciate that. And those come from some people that I think the world of as well. So, yeah, this was a tough one. I think if I had a superpower, maybe it would be morphing, like just the ability to like move around and change and adapt to whatever project. I mean, even at front office, it's like, we're going to launch a podcast and I might not know that, but then I get into that mindset and then we're throwing an event. So you need to do that. So, yeah, I guess morphing. I also think, because I was on the client side for 4 years, I was the person across the desk getting pitched the ideas. So I think like a client in that respect, which is kind of a morphing as well. So yeah, I guess that would be my superpower.
Wow, I love that. Morphing as a superpower. And it was mentioned several times what a great presenter you are. You just stated that you were on the other side of the table. And so you knew what was going to resonate with you on the client side and likely take those skills on when you're, switching roles. So
Yeah.
what do you think are the keys to a great client presentation?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple. First is storytelling, the ability to tell a story and to connect why. Um, I think it's less about you and more about them and how that you are going to solve their problems. I always say, I don't want to, sit through a deck and go 14 pages on how great your brand is before you get to how are you going to help me, and how are you going to, help me put more butts in seats, or how are you going to help me get my sales team more leads. So that, I think, is a huge thing. And I think a lot of organizations overlook that. They want to thump their chest and say how great they are. And that is important as well. But I do think you could throw that in the appendix. And then I always say, is it easy to understand? And I used to always say to my team, it's the stranger on the street test. Could I pass this deck or this one sheet to a stranger on the street, and could they read it and totally understand exactly what you're pitching and what the idea is? Because I do think there's a lot of flowery language in marketing and a lot of buzzwords, but at the end of the day, clients just want to know, what are you pitch? What do I get? What am I paying for? And what's in it for me? So that would be my advice.
Stranger
there.
on the street test. I love it. That is so good.
Or your
And
mom, you could say, would my mom
yeah,
be able to read it and understand it?
yeah. Well, you get so in your head and so in your space, and you're working with the same people, and you tend to sort of regenerate the same type of proposals. So taking on that mindset of, hey, if I gave this to somebody who wasn't living in this job and working in this space day to day, would they know what I'm trying to pitch? So that's a great tip right there. Do you have a goal you are working to achieve this year?
Oh my gosh. Well, we bought a house in January, so I'm trying to make my office more presentable. I think, professionally, my goals are to continue to grow and push the limits here at FOS, and really, continuing to elevate the brand and riding that wave, to be honest. I mean, newsletters are doing really well these days. The inbox is everybody's new homepage, and these consumers, almost 1 million consumers, are raising their hand and saying, I want you to email me 2 times a day the latest, news and what's going on in the world of sports and business and culture. And I think that's huge. I also think professionally, work-life balance is definitely a huge area of focus. We are at FOS a remote first company, which has its pluses and its challenges as well. For me, I think it's just being able to close the computer, because the tendency is to just sit and work limitless hours. So I do think kind of like having that work-life balance and being able to step away and take time for myself is a big part of one of my goals.
Yeah. What's the big tip around that? I heard you say close the computer, which, closing it and walking away is good, sort of having it in that separate
Yeah.
space. But I ran into this last night where, dinner was done, the kids were in bed, and I'm like sitting on the couch with my husband watching football, and I am beyond antsy. I'm like, I should be productive. And it's so difficult to some nights, say like, this is production right now, like taking up 2 hours or an hour or whatever before bed and like not really doing anything. You need that break. So that
Yeah.
can be tough. And especially for you when you're working in this content engine where it's like you fill the cup, you distribute, and then time to do it again. So do you have any additional tips on how you have, I won't say mastered yet, but on how you're working your way through that this year?
I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to get better on 2 ends in the morning. So sometimes I'll drive, my husband goes into the city and I'll drive him to the train. And I'm like, do not open your computer at 7:30, like go for a walk, go do laundry, go find something else to do. So I'm trying to make a conscious effort to not start the minute I wake up and really kind of ease into my day. And then, the same at night, because it is easy. Same thing. I'll be watching a sporting event and I'm like, oh, I can listen and still crank out a bunch of stuff. So I do try to limit screen time, like an hour or hour plus before I go to bed, which they say is something you should do anyway, because your mind doesn't shut down. And then I'd like to get better at just getting up and walking outside. I went to a shared workspace last week and I was like, oh my God, I have to go out and get lunch. I can't just walk down my stairs and make lunch. So just making an effort to try to get out of the house. Again, definitely haven't mastered it, but I have goals.
Well, now's the time to get out and walk because the fall colors have got to be
Yes.
popping for you. And I had a question on here. What's life like for you in New York City? And then as we were talking, I learned that you did move out to the suburbs, but I want to touch on that a little bit. Life for you in the city as of last year and all the years before, and then now this transition into the suburbs. Obviously, a lot of us move around for sports, and for you, you stayed with the same job, but that's a big move going from the city out to the burbs and a big lifestyle
Mhm.
change. So let's talk about that a little bit. What's the transition been like? What was it like in the city versus now you're out and taking the train in if you're
Yeah.
going into town?
So I lived across the river in New Jersey. So I got to stare at the New York skyline for over 2 decades, which was just awesome. And I think I took that skyline for granted a lot because it was just always there and so beautiful. It was an easy jaunt into the city for me. I could take a 5-minute ferry, I could get on the bus, I could take the train. So life there was, it was, obviously people were working in the city, going out all the time. So it was hustling and bustling. Then it got a little quiet. And so you just got to stare at the city, but you couldn't go in. And yeah, my husband and I just kind of said, we're tired of apartment living. It's time to get some outdoor space. I mean, COVID hit everybody when you're in an apartment, no matter how great it is or how great the view is. If you can't get outside, you find yourself just craving that space. Yeah, so we moved out to the suburbs, bought a house. We're still only about a 40-minute train ride from New York. So like I think I mentioned to you, I was in last week. We had our Rising 25 events and it was bustling. I mean, about a year ago, you'd walk through the city, you're like, wow, this is like New York. It's quiet. And now I feel like things are getting much more back to normal. So yeah, it was hustling and bustling and a lot of tourists. I was in Times Square area and yeah, it's great. I mean, I love having everything a train ride away, whether it's a show, whether it's meeting with colleagues, having a client meeting, touristy things. Yeah, so it's fun.
Yeah, New York still remains the epicenter for business here in the United States. That's for
Yeah.
sure. So great to hear stories of the comeback.
Yes, definitely.
Well, it's been such a great conversation, and it's time for the final four questions, which are pretty quick, except for the first, which is a little more in depth. But what is your best piece of advice for women today to level up tomorrow?
Gosh, so I have a lot. I would say be patient. I do feel, if I can say, the younger generation is just, I want to move, I want to accelerate, just keep doing the work, doing it well. Raise your hand for anything and everything. I do think along my career, I got involved in projects at Meredith with the HR team and onboarding new employees. Like, always be open to doing things that are beyond your daily job description, I guess, if you will. Um, I think hitch your wagon to a star. And I do mean that in a female way, especially. I've had two amazing female mentors throughout my career that I really learned a lot from, but I also had men that championed me as well. So I think it is important. I always liked to find those women in the organization that were at that big level and say, would you have a cup of coffee with me? I'd love to know what I need to do. And I think you'd be surprised that many, many people are always willing to do that. And the worst they could say is, no, I'm too busy. But if you don't ask, you'll never have the opportunity to get that advice from people. And I think my last, which someone had said to me, is that you're the author of your story. So if you're stuck on a certain page, you have the power to write that new chapter. So I think always be evaluating your happiness and I always like to keep learning. If I'm not learning in a role, then it's time for me to move on. So, but you have that kind of power to take charge of your career.
Beautiful advice and amazing reminders, no matter where you are, if you're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, just wonderful advice, great reminders. Thank you for sharing that. And well, we want to know, where are you traveling to next?
So sadly, nowhere, because I just, when we moved, found out my passport's expired. So now I have to go through that whole process. But I'm hoping, my husband and I are both big golfers. So we're hoping maybe somewhere in the Caribbean in the winter time after I get my passport renewed, which I hear is taking quite a while these days. But yeah, just for like a little sun, fun, and golf. We like Turks and Caicos, Bermuda. Bermuda's not so great in the winter.
Very nice.
Somewhere
Well,
sunny.
we just did passport stuff this summer and it was only a few weeks. So
Oh,
fingers
good.
crossed for you.
Okay. Good to know.
What is your pump up song?
Oh my gosh. I thought this one was so hard. I don't know why. I love music, but I love all kinds of music, which is why I think it's hard. I mean, I'm a big country fan. So I like Miranda Lambert, Zach Brown Band. But I have to say, and I'm probably dating myself, is I love the band U2. I have seen them probably 20 plus times in concert. I hosted my own U2 5 Songs I Desire Most on Sirius XM radio. So I love Where the Streets Have No Name by U2. I love the way it builds, and then it just makes you want to run and play it loud and roll the windows down. So
Love it. And then finally, what's your favorite quote?
So I have 2 favorite quotes. One is, just because things aren't going your way doesn't mean they aren't going well. And I do think that I try to remind myself of that a lot, because it's like, I'm definitely a type A. I'm a, leader, detail person. You can read into control freak. So sometimes just because it's not going the way that you're going doesn't mean, there's progress and things are going well. And then I do think, when I was trying to break into sports, another quote that really hit me was, remember the days that you prayed for what you have now. So just be great. It's like a reminder just to be grateful, because there were so many days, there are days where I put in long days here at FOS and I'm like, just remember how much you wanted this, like just be grateful that you're actually doing it and doing something that you love. So.
Beautiful. Well,
Right.
Stephanie, it has been such a pleasure to interview you. I would say that this interview is filled with reminders for all of us on gratefulness for today, tips to level up in your job today and tomorrow, and the advice and the wisdom that we need to continue to share among ourselves, our colleagues, and our mentors. So thank you for being here. And we know you're going to continue to just rise in your career, and we're so happy to follow you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. It was great talking to you.